And welcome back to another episode of Rad Talk, where sports and medicine collide. I'm Dennis.
And I'm Gage. And today we got a juicy little episode for you guys. But we had I don't want to say this. We need to make a point of clarification about it was brought to our Dennis's attention, and then he told me that I said something in episode one that I need to clarify. So we were talking, just to give a little background, we were talking about how you and I met, and then it led to the point of ultrasound techs are a little more interactive with the radiologist than other types of techs. And I said the techs don't matter outside of radiology, which was a little bit of a misspeak. In the context we were talking about, I meant more so we rely on you guys a little bit more for interpretation and what's communication about
Right.
what you see on the exam and
Right.
some of the findings, and if you label whatever.
hmm
The other, obviously, the other techs matter. Good tech can make your life much easier. And then I
hmm
tend to be focused on the other side, where I think a bad tech, not having bad techs is more important than having good techs, because a
hmm
bad tech can ruin, just they just make everything so much worse.
Right.
So I think the CT ultrasound, CT X-ray MR techs, I don't rely on them as much for interpretation of images or to communicate things, or stuff like that.
Right.
Where they're a little more important is procedurally, with IR
hmm
or non-IR type procedures. They're
Right.
good with their machines. MR doesn't really do a whole bunch of procedures, but X-ray and CT do quite a few. So if you have a good tech that can help with positioning and getting the patient, especially um, what's the word, like calming the patient down, because a lot of patients, the doctors order these tests and they don't explain what's about to happen. So the
Right.
first time the patient's hearing about it is when I tell them, like, hey, this is what we're about to do. So if you
hmm
have a good tech in ultrasound, in CT or X-ray, it can help
hmm
calm the patient down. And then if they're really good, they can help speed the procedure along. I remember we had one guy in my residence who had been doing it for, like, I don't know, 35 or 40 years. And
hmm
he was good enough, and we trusted him, that he actually set up the patient. And if you were doing, say, like a joint injection, we
hmm
would let him mark the skin and clean the skin. So he would pretty much tell us where to go and everything. So we could
Right.
just walk in, stick the needle in, put the contrast in, and we're out. So I meant, in my point, where is ultrasound is much more important in terms of interpreting the exam.
hmm
And even, I would say, maybe protocoling is probably a little bit even across the board. We're ultra or radiologists are good enough at protocoling ultrasound, like, if they
hmm
have symptoms X, Y, and Z, we know which exam to give them.
Right.
But it's just, we'll talk about it a little bit,
hmm
coming up with this, the lack of standardization in ultrasound. It really,
hmm
frankly, kind of just pisses me off. Whereas if you look at, like, a CT abdomen pelvis, is a
hmm
CT abdomen pelvis, they're all the same.
hmm
The protocol is all the same. A shoulder MR, they're all the same.
hmm
And then X-ray, you get the same projections every time, so
Right.
it's much more standardized. So I don't need as
hmm
much help
Yeah.
with interpretation.
Don't
So
forget nuclear. Don't forget nuclear, man.
yeah, nuclear is its own thing. I don't read a whole bunch of nuke med.
Mhm.
Uh, I can't stand it. So, but the guys that read it, they do rely a little bit more on those texts than you would some other ones too.
hmm
I just don't happen to read
Right.
nuke med as much as the other modalities.
hmm
So
Makes sense.
we just
So
wanted to clarify,
no,
texts, you know,
hey, everybody
texts are
matters.
important.
You're important.
So,
It can make and break an exam, no matter who it is. It just, yeah,
mhm.
for sure.
But that leads perfectly into the next segment, which we're
Mm.
going to steal from our friend Peter Griffin. And we had another thing we'll talk about in the upcoming episode here is my first month as an attending. So
Mhm.
I've had a lot of experiences as an attending that I didn't have as, like, a fellow or a resident. So what we're going to do here is take
Mhm.
Peter's segment and
Mhm.
mention some things, that kind of grind our gears.
Right.
Essentially, things that kind of piss us off. And most of this has happened recently. That's why it's fresh in our minds.
Hmm.
So I'm going to let you go first because you had the first thing that
Yeah.
kind of prompted this segment.
Yeah. I think um, what we had what kind of bugged me is I had somebody come through the ER, and they had this mass for a long period of time, and it was well documented and well known. The ER doctor ordered an ultrasound for us to look at this mass
Hmm.
that they thought that felt larger than before. And it just so happened that um, the radiologist also said that they were going to follow up with a dedicated ultrasound and a dedicated other modality that would look at this mass.
Hmm.
And so we're going to do an ultrasound that we know that we're going to do another ultrasound, another dedicated radiologic exam, outpatient wise, regardless. And so we're looking at something that we know exists, and it just, the radiologist said it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
The ER doctor was kind of like, I don't really think we really need to do anything about this. But the patient was like, it feels different, it feels larger.
Yeah.
They were worried. And so they ordered it. The rad told me we're going to do it, and I'm going to recommend the other exams afterwards. And it was just like if we don't do this exam today and she can get in, or he can get in a week from now, or a a couple days
Hmm.
from now as an outpatient,
Yeah.
like that's, we're saving her money, we're saving the reading, we're saving this time,
Yep.
which it seemed like everybody thought was just, no, we're doing this just because. And so we're like wasting time, we're wasting resources, we're wasting
Hmm.
money, we're wasting a bed in the ER. And so it was really frustrating that they didn't just schedule it for the outpatient exam
Yep.
and do what we should have done. But they, even if we'd have found something that was different, I feel like they're still going to go through the next. We're still going to do the same thing
Yeah.
regardless. Like they're
Yeah.
not going into immediate surgery for like. And so that was just, that's a hard thing to, and it seems like it's happened obviously before. This isn't the first time, um, but these things happen, and it's hard to comprehend why. If everybody knows it's not like the right thing to do, we do these things, and I think a lot of times it's for lawyer purposes, and
It's American healthcare.
what if
Yeah.
just like one in a
Yeah.
million, one in a whatever,
Yeah.
and I know those exist and that happens, but we would have caught that what if in a week or two or whatever
Yeah.
that follow up was, and saved her
Yeah.
or him the time and
Yeah.
money.
You're essentially practicing for the exception and not the rule when you
Right,
do that. So
right.
there's a couple issues when you first mentioned this to me. I've been on not both sides of the coin, but I have two different perspectives because I was a resident or a
Mhm.
trainee, I guess,
Right.
and now I'm on the other side of the coin as being an attending. So
Hmm.
when you first mentioned this to me, my first thought was most residents and fellows have the same thought as you had, which was
Hmm.
why the hell are we doing this?
Right.
Um, because it's extra work for you, it's
Hmm.
extra work for us to read it.
Hmm.
You have to put the patient through. I mean, it's an ultrasound. It's not like painful or anything, but
Right.
you have to put them through the process and so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
when I was a resident and fellow, I would get like extremely angry when I had to read things that I
Hmm.
knew were medically unnecessary.
Hmm.
So, and then that brings up another point that we can talk about in a minute. But
Hmm.
now that I'm on the other side, I understand where your attending is coming from, where he's
Hmm.
like, we kind of just have to do it because
Hmm.
radiology, unfortunately, is referral based, right? We rely on other people to order imaging. We
Right.
can't order the imaging ourselves.
Yeah.
So he or she, what your radiologist, was playing a political game by not pissing off the
Right.
ultrasound or the ER doctor
Right.
and just doing the ultrasound.
Hmm.
I'm not saying they were right.
Right.
but I don't know if you're, for the people listening, there's the way things are set up. I don't know if your radiologist was a partner or if they were like me, an associate just starting out. If
Yeah.
they were an associate, you don't want to piss off the partners
Yeah.
by pissing off the ER doctor who then goes to complain to your, your senior partners, and they're like, "Well, why the hell did you say no? It's just an ultrasound. You
Yeah.
can read
Yeah.
it in 5 minutes and
Be done.
recommend the dedicated ultrasound and
Right.
whatever
Yeah.
afterwards."
Right.
So he or she is playing a political game.
Mm.
And then, frankly, another thing is we don't do the ultrasound, so we don't care, right? Like, just being
Yeah.
honest, we
No, it's
don't.
true.
You guys do it, and then it
Right.
shows up on our list, and it takes us 5 minutes to read. So
Right.
we're like, well, why would I risk pissing off the
Hmm.
ER doctor? Maybe the ER doctor's connected. Maybe they're part of the
Right.
board of directors at the hospital, and you're just like, well, shit, I just pissed off,
High
the
up.
people that are, yeah, that if you work for the hospital, they sign your checks, they do all this, they control stuff. So
Hmm.
you're like, I don't want to risk it.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you also know the you're kind of wasting resources, right? Like this
Right.
is exam is not needed,
Hmm.
and then even though it's the patient who wants it, they're
Hmm.
going to be pissed off when they get the bill,
Right.
and they're like, well, we're going to do another ultrasound anyway, and well,
Yeah.
you could be like, we tried to tell you,
Yeah.
you can wait 2 or 3 days and get
Right.
in and skip this part.
Yeah.
But so I can see both sides, and I as a, when you're young and you think you can change things, you're like, well, why? This is stupid. We need to put our
Right.
foot down.
Hmm.
Then as you get older and they just kind of beat it out of you, you're like, just do the damn
Just do
exam. It's so much easier
it.
to not hear people complain. Just do
Right.
it, and we'll be done.
And I think, and I hope in this instance that they told this patient that, okay, we're going to do this, um, because you're having these issues now and this you feel this way.
Hmm.
But I've talked to the radiologist, and the radiologist is also going to recommend a dedicated exam for this and another radiologic study, immediately afterwards. Not immediately, but as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And so the
Hmm.
patient knows, okay, I'm going to do this. And so then, in a week or 2 weeks or whenever they make the next appointment, the patient knows, okay, I just had this done, but they told me we were going to do this and they told me we are going to do it again. And so like I'm prepared to do the same thing
Yeah.
essentially again. And so they're not less like, we just did this like 2 weeks ago. Why am I doing this? This doesn't make any sense. They're like,
Yeah.
no, we told you we're going to do this again. And so I hope that, not something I followed
It's
up with, but I
yeah.
hope that they didn't just like
Good
do
luck.
the exam and then they're just like, okay, we're going to do it again in 2 weeks. And she or he or she's like, why? Like, didn't they do a
It's
good
one of
enough a job?
my
Yeah.
least favorite aspects of radiology is that I don't get to tell the patient
Hmm.
anything.
Right.
So if I see something in my exam or if I recommend follow up, I don't get to explain myself.
Hmm.
And then I know majority of the time that the ordering provider probably doesn't, either one, they don't explain it at all, or two, they can't explain it because they're not a
Yeah.
radiologist.
Right.
So that's a frustrating part about radiology. And
Hmm.
then another thing that this brings up, this is a tangent that we could go on, but
Okay.
you essentially said you did this exam because the patient wanted it,
Right.
which one of my biggest issues with American healthcare
Hmm.
is Americans because they have no idea
Hmm.
what's urgent and
Hmm.
what's emergent. So
Hmm.
you didn't say this, but I know you work in the ER. This was an ER patient,
Right.
and I know what the diagnosis was for this patient, and I can tell you it was not emergent.
Hmm.
So this person should have either gone to an urgent care
Hmm.
or just made an appointment with their um,
Primary.
primary doctor.
Hmm.
So I get extremely pissed off when
Hmm.
Americans don't know urgent versus emergent.
Hmm.
Like if I get studies, then I'm like, this is coming from the ER, but this is an urgent care thing, or this you should have gone to your primary doctor for this and then worked it up.
Right.
So, and that contributes to rising costs in
Right.
healthcare and unnecessary exams, yada yada yada.
And then that's the same token with a lot of patients that don't have insurance. They don't
Yeah.
have a primary care. So then where can
Hmm.
well, my primary care doctor is the ER doctor. And so
Yeah.
that's where our hospitals reason I'm trying, part of the reason why they have to charge so much because you're bleeding money from
Yeah.
people who don't have
Yeah, I
insurance.
mean, people that are insured end up paying for the people that are not insured.
Right, right, right.
That's,
It's just
we're getting into business and
yeah, yeah.
politics, but
It's just a crazy system, It's
that's just how,
broken.
that's how American medicine works,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so that
And
was that would piss me. That did piss me off too when I was a resident. So I can empathize with you being angry about that.
mhm.
So the next one, since I shit on all the other techs in episode one, I'm about to shit on the ultrasound techs in this
Oh,
episode.
yeah.
So I have a few things,
Oh
and I just
goodness.
remembered some more.
Oh no.
These are all ultrasound related because I had like 2 or 3 shifts recently that were I was the ultrasound person. So the one is not really ultrasound. It's not the tech's fault.
Hmm.
It's the lack of standardization we talked about a little bit,
Hmm.
and I always use the example of right upper quadrant ultrasound.
Yep.
One, it's not the same at every hospital. You've mentioned before that sometimes it includes the pancreas, sometimes it
Hmm.
doesn't. Yada yada
Hmm.
yada. So you're already off to a bad start.
Hmm.
Sometimes they include the pancreas, sometimes they don't.
Right.
And then sometimes people start with the pancreas,
Hmm.
which is the way I prefer it. I want them to start with the pancreas.
Right.
Okay, so then they start the pancreas and then they go to the liver. Boom. Okay, we're 2 for 2 so far. But then I get a whole bunch where it's like they go liver and then they're like, oh, here's the gallbladder. Then they do the gallbladder. And they're
Hmm.
like, oh, here's the left lobe of the liver. And they go back to the liver. And I'm just like, no. Because now I use a templated report. So I have to go liver, then I have to go to the gallbladder, then I have to
Hmm.
go back to the liver section, then I have to go back to the gallbladder section when you mentioned
Hmm.
the biliary ducts, right? So I have to
Right.
just
Right.
boom, boom. I have to keep dicking
Right.
around back and forth, back and forth.
Hmm.
So that has driven. It's not that, like I said, it's not the tech's fault, but that just drives me up a wall. That there's
Hmm.
no standardization.
Yeah.
That's why the other modalities are a little bit better in that regard because
Right.
it's everything's the same every time.
And that's a confusing even and just even different hospitals that you can order a gallbladder study and that's all we
Mm-hmm.
do. Or you can order a liver study and that's all we do. As opposed to some hospital, you order a gallbladder study and you do a complete right upper quadrant. And
Yeah,
I don't understand. And my understanding is, which is minimal, but I think they bill for
it's
the
different.
same
Yeah.
thing. Like if I do a right upper quadrant or if I do a gallbladder, I think they bill the same.
I mean,
Um,
that's that. I don't
that,
know the billing either, but
yeah, yeah. I feel
if it's
yeah.
billing the same, I'm pissed off and I'm reading all these extra organs
Reading all these
for no
extra
reason.
organs, yeah, or where you're doing the extra organs, yeah. Um, it's yeah, I can totally understand that. Or labeling. Some folks label. They label it liver and they look at the gallbladder while they're labeling it liver.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of different things I've seen. I can understand as being a radiologist where you're just like, what the heck are you doing? Like,
Because
just
I
give
mean,
me.
in your guys' mind, it's the way you do it, right?
Hmm.
So the way they do, that's how they do the exam every time. So it makes sense to you guys because that's how you do it every time.
Yeah.
But now we have to adjust because dentist does it one way, this tech does it this way, another tech does it this way.
Hmm.
So now I have to adjust my reading style, which to most people doesn't seem like a big deal. But
Hmm.
if you're a radiologist, you know that if you alter the way you read, that's how you miss things, right? Like
Hmm.
I have a checklist. I read the CT abdomen pelvis. I read it in the same order every time. I
Hmm.
say the exact same thing every
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
So when I have to keep flipping back and forth, that's how you
Yep.
miss things,
Right.
and then that's how
Hmm.
people get sued. And by
Right.
people, I mean me. Like I'm the one that's going to get sued, not you guys.
It's true.
So
Yeah. Repetition, repetition, repetition. If you can constantly do the same repetition of order, even if it's something new, as you see a disease, something that you need to mention, you're still through your repetitions. So it can throw everything off.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then let's see. There's another one. I hate, hate when you
Sure.
guys find something that is not supposed to be in the exam. Like you're doing
Oh,
what's the like a DVT study,
yep, yep.
and you find a Baker's cyst or you find a lymph node. Don't fucking show me that. Now I have to comment on it. I'm
Yeah,
pissed off. Like just do not show it. You're in charge of the images.
right.
I trust that if Dennis sees what he thinks is a popliteal cyst.
Hmm.
He can diagnose it as a popliteal cyst. He knows that it doesn't mean diddly dick, and he
Hmm.
lets it go.
Hmm.
Do oh, I get so angry
Oh my gosh.
because they find some stuff that I'm just like, now I'm cornered. I have to
Yeah.
mention it, and
Hmm.
if it's not as simple as a benign lymph node or a popliteal cyst or something, where I
Right.
can just write it off and say that's what
Hmm.
it is.
Yeah.
There's one that they found a like a fluid collection or something. There's a
Hmm.
DVT study, and they found a
Yeah.
fluid collection on like
Hmm.
the side of the leg. I'm like,
Hmm.
there's you guys should not be over there, but
Hmm.
because the patient's like, oh, I hurt here. Nah, nah.
Yeah.
Do not go searching for stuff.
Yeah. I think that's tough, and as I see both sides, um, because I see so many times that these patient comes in and they're having leg pain, and they say, "Well, I'm having leg pain on my lateral portion of my leg," and the ER doctor, or whomever, orders a DVT study, and you're like, okay, like the pain's over here. So the ordering doctor's
Yeah,
they're ordering the wrong exam.
yeah.
They need to order a
Which means you
non-vascular
do the
study,
wrong exam.
which means that I'm looking for a blood clot when I need to be looking
Yeah,
not for a non-vascular study. And so I'm doing the wrong exam, and I'm looking and I'm like, I can validate. Okay, so I'm looking at the uh, perineal vein, so I can look at the perineal veins or the posterior tibs on the lateral portion of the leg there.
mm-hmm.
And then I'll
Yeah.
find that fluid collection,
Which is
or
what you
even,
fuckers do. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
or I'm looking at your carotid arteries, and I see a thyroid nodule.
Yep.
Um,
Oh my god. I want to throw my fist through the fucking screen when you guys mention stupid stuff like that. Oh my god.
and so you put, incidental finding of
Yeah, incidental. Yeah.
incidental, yeah, and then you have to recommend some sort of a follow up
Yeah,
or
and unless they're like 95 and I'm like I don't care at this point. If they're under I don't know, 75, 80, I have to now
mm,
recommend the dedicated thyroid ultrasound,
for
which
sure,
I know you guys are going to be pissed off about doing.
because now we have to do it. Yep.
So,
And
yeah.
it's tough, and I've seen that a lot. Like they are like, okay, they saw this, and I think I've had conversations, or people have had conversations with ER doctors, like, if you don't think it's a blood clot, like if they're coming in for pain on the lateral portion of their leg, and you think it's like
Hmm.
a fluid collection, like, don't order a blood clot. Don't, like, order the non-vascular study, and then if you still, or order them both, I guess, which kind of
Well,
sucks.
calm
So now I'm
down.
getting two exams
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I could do it under the DVT study, and I can look on the lateral on that area.
Yeah.
Should I walk over there? Maybe not, but I can get away
No,
with it
I don't
because
know.
those are also some deep veins on the lateral portion there. But I can see why you'd be upset, because you're just
You
like,
guys will, yeah,
oh,
you guys will justify it however you can, I'm sure.
yeah,
But
for sure, yeah, yeah. And I've had phone calls from radiologists saying, like, exactly what you said.
yeah.
Don't look at this, is not a non-vascular study. Look for the blood clots. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I looked for the blood clots and I saw that. Like,
Yeah.
so, and
Well,
there,
don't hit save on the image where you saw that. So
save on the image, because now I have to
I
talk.
think that aspect of ultrasound would change if you guys were ever to read your own studies. You wouldn't go looking for stuff that wasn't supposed to be a part of the exam.
Well,
So
it creates more work for you, but it creates more work for us too. But I don't know, and I think, because I feel like sometimes if we don't, like, that patient came in for this pain, this fluid, whatever it was, and we
mhm.
found it, and now we found the problem. And so it's like, I want to find the problem. I don't want to create more of a whatever for you and whatever for me. I found the problem. Now I'm going to
Mhm.
have to probably do another exam. We're going to have to do something else.
Yeah.
You have to mention it. More things arise. But it's like, okay, at least, like, I don't know. As a patient, I feel like the hardest thing sometimes is, like, medicine is finding what the heck's wrong. And so, like, we figure out what's wrong. It sucks all around for us to do it, you to read it, the patient to, at least they found out what's wrong. I don't know. I've had many conversations with radiologists
Yeah.
who literally probably hated my guts
Yeah.
because I've found stuff that I was not looking for,
Yeah.
and I may have went out of my way to
Exactly. Yeah.
look for it. Because I mean, now if they come in and they're like, I'm having, leg pain, and they order an abdomen, I'm not going to go down in their leg.
Yeah, obviously.
But
Yeah,
but if I'm looking at your
I'd fire
carotid,
you on the spot if that
yeah,
were what
if
you
I'm
were
looking at
doing.
your carotid artery and I'm going by and I see, oh, there's the thyroid. Oh, there's some crazy nodules or whatever. Like, okay, like I see that, I can justify that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny you say that because I've had so many conversations with Rads about that pet peeve alone. Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, this is kind of along the same things, and I mentioned this off the camera, off recording, but
Mm-hmm.
when you guys mention stuff, sometimes I feel cornered.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to disagree with you, but now I can't because you've put it in the little sheet. It's now in the patient's chart, record,
I hate
whatever.
this. I hate that stupid
So
thing.
I
Yeah.
can't. We use the example of steatosis,
Mm-hmm.
which I personally think you guys overdiagnose as sonographers,
100%.
but I feel obligated to say that there's steatosis unless I have like other imaging, like if I have a
Mhm.
CT that clearly shows there's no steatosis,
Right.
then I'll disagree. But if I don't, I feel cornered that I
Mm-hmm.
have to.
Mention it.
There was a finding tonight where I'm like, I have no idea what I don't see it, but I
Mm-hmm.
felt obligated. I had to say it because you put it down, or not
Mm-hmm.
you, but the tech put it down.
Right.
So sometimes those sheets are helpful because it lets me know what you guys are thinking. But then you guys put down everything, and I'm like, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
Now I feel cornered, and
Mm-hmm.
what if this does, even if your finding doesn't come out to be true, or
Mm-hmm.
but something else happens and I get sued, and they're like, oh, we saw you didn't mention, the sonographer mentioned this, and you didn't. You're just like, well, shit,
Yeah.
So,
Well, they were wrong.
but.
Yeah.
So ultrasound's just not my it's not my favorite modality to read, so I do get angry when I have to
Mm-hmm.
read it. But
I get angry.
these are some of the things that piss me
Yeah.
off. And
But
then
mm,
go ahead.
yeah, I say, well, the steatosis thing, and I agree with you. I think a lot of times, because it's so, we're comparing steatosis, especially the liver, with the kidney or the vessels in
Yeah,
the porta hepatis. Um, and so it's a lot of times called fatty liver, fatty liver, fatty liver.
yeah.
And I think as a sonographer, you see a fatty liver so often that it messes you up if you see a normal liver.
You don't know what normal is. Yeah.
Yeah, you start forgetting what normal looks like because everybody has a fatty liver. Like it's
The
just,
issue with ultrasound and steatosis specifically is, sure, you can use the right kidney as like a standard, but
mhm,
there's no standard for
right,
steatosis. Whereas like on a CT, I can take the Hounsfield units and say the established number is 40. If it's below 40, it's steatosis. If it's not, it's not steatosis. If it's
right,
an enhanced study, if it doesn't enhance by X amount more than the spleen, it's steatosis. So there's
hmm,
like hard set rules that say this is steatosis.
right,
Ultrasound, it's like, oh, I can't really see the diaphragm. Oh,
mhm,
there's just shit that's made up that are like, oh yeah, it's steatosis. It's not.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we've mentioned this before, but I think ultrasound is a good screening tool.
hmm,
I don't think it's a very good diagnostic tool outside of certain, like it's good for DVTs.
right. And
But
torsion, we have testicular
yeah,
torsion.
the torsion DVT, it's good for cholecystitis. It
Certain
has
things.
certain things,
Right, right.
but
That's its
in my
pros.
mind, it's more of a screening exam. Whereas if I
Hmm.
see something, I'm like, I don't really know what this is. So
Right.
if you bring a cirrhotic patient in, you do your ultrasound, you see a non-specific hyperechoic lesion, you're like, oh, this could be HCC. So now I get to go to MR, which is going to
Hmm.
be much better than the
Yeah,
ultrasound.
much better.
But yeah, ultrasound has its. I told
Right.
I told you some of the things on ultrasound, and good lord,
Good Lord.
it's good. It's good for a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, you mentioned torsion. It's good for testicular cancer. It's actually the way to go if you're going to
Hmm.
diagnose it. So it
Yeah,
has its uses. It's good for procedures. It's really good for procedures because there's no
right.
radiation.
Yeah.
It's live, right? I could see my needle as I'm
Hmm.
doing the procedure, so
Right.
it's really good for procedures. So I mean, but it has its uses.
Right. Which was interesting because I've worked at so many different places, and I know I had a conversation with one of the radiologists that they use CT. It's just what you guys were trained in. Like they'll use CT for a liver biopsy or CT for
Hmm.
kidney biopsy versus an ultrasound, and it's just the comfort level of the
Hmm.
radiologist. of what they were,
Yeah.
and you're just like, because I go places, I'm like, oh, okay, we're doing liver biopsies, and then other places, I'm like, why are we not doing liver biopsies? They're like,
Yeah.
all in CT, and it's just the comfort level of what
Hmm.
what you were trained to, how the way you were trained to do it, um, and
Yeah. For
so
the most part, it's comfort levels. There's obviously like if you get a 400, you get a patient my size, using ultrasound is going to be tough, right? Because it's going to
yeah,
be hard to penetrate.
right,
So CT is going to be much better to do
hmm
if you have to do a deep biopsy, like a kidney or something like that.
right, right,
And then
right,
obviously ultrasound, you can't do a lung because you can't see through the lung.
right,
So CT is better. But for the most part, ultrasound I think is probably better just because there's no radiation. It's
hmm
really quick. It's so much quicker.
yeah,
So, and I personally struggle with CT because I can't adjust it live. So
hmm
I have to put the needle in. I have to either do the CT fluoro or step out. Like I can't
hmm
ultrasound. I can like watch my needle as I'm doing it.
right,
Same with like fluoro. So I'm much better, more comfortable with fluoro and
hmm
ultrasound procedures for that reason.
right, right, preference,
But okay, so the last one, the last thing that really ticked us off was both of us.
hmm
But I was the one that brought this up. I forget, it was an ultrasound at like 4:30. No, I read it at 5. It was ordered at 4:30, but
hmm
it came from one of our remote sites, so it takes
hmm
a little bit longer to get uploaded and then finally on the list. So by
yeah,
the time I got to it, it was probably 5 or 5:15, and I
hmm
finished it by 5:30, and
hmm
it was, how do I want to describe it? It was a finding that was serious, but
hmm
it was not going to kill the patient
hmm
that day, but
right,
it's something that needed to be addressed.
hmm
So I tried to call the provider, and one of my partners heard me
hmm
because it was an outpatient study, which is why I had the issue. So I
yeah,
called the office, the provider's office. I get the answering service, and they're
hmm
like, "Oh, it's after hours." Yeah, and I'm just like, "Oh my god!" But
hmm
luckily, my partner overhears me, and he's
hmm
like, "Hey, I have that provider's number if you want it." So I hung
hmm
up, and I was like, "Yeah, give me the."
cell
I
phone,
called him, nothing. I called him twice.
hmm
The first one immediately went to voicemail. So I'm like, oh, he probably has the thing on where it like
hmm
blocks numbers that he doesn't know. So I was like,
yeah,
okay, I'll call again. No, boom, straight to voicemail.
hmm
So I left a voicemail and they called
hmm
back eventually. It was the next day.
yeah,
But I was pissed because I'm like, you guys ordered this as a stat outpatient
hmm
study. You
hmm
need to be available to take the results,
yep,
even if they come after hours.
hmm
Luckily it wasn't a result that was going to kill the patient immediately,
right,
but it was something that they needed to address,
it's important, yeah,
urgently.
hmm
So I was just, and it's not the first time it's happened. Uh, I've called several providers and they just don't answer or
hmm
they don't call back.
hmm
And I'm just like, one of them was urgent. And I'm like, luckily I knew they saw it because they ordered follow up imaging.
hmm
But I'm like, you guys have to call me back. I have no idea that
that's fine,
that
yeah,
I called you. And I'm like, I don't mention the patient's name. I can't
hmm
over the phone.
right,
So I just say I have some imaging results that I need to discuss with you.
hmm
Here's my number. Call me. So, but they don't, and I'm
yeah,
just. It's only a big deal because we had my program director, I think,
hmm
in residency, has mentioned several times where you know ED provider specifically orders a study.
hmm
We read it. There's some findings that you need to know about now.
hmm
So not you, the ED provider needs to know about. So we call them. They don't
hmm
answer. They don't respond. They don't call back. Whatever. And it never gets relayed to the
hmm
patient. And so an adverse outcome happens with the patient, and we are at fault,
yeah,
even though we tried to contact the ordering provider.
hmm
Which, oh my, I about quit radiology right then and there. I was
yeah,
like, if it's we're gonna get sued because you didn't follow up the results of your study. That
hmm
doesn't make
that's
any sense at all.
no, that's
So
crazy,
that's why these guys not being available just pisses me off because I
yeah,
know it's going to be my ass on the line
hmm
if something were, say this was torsion and I
hmm
said that the testicle is viable still,
yeah,
it's 2 hours. He's had testicular pain for 2 hours. I say it's torsion, it's still viable. If the
right,
surgeon goes in now, he can save it, or
right,
she can save it, whatever. But
mm
if I call and it takes you 4, 5, 6 hours to get back or see the results, that testicle's infarcted now and they lose it.
right,
And then the patient's like, well, what the hell?
that's how important it is, yeah.
So,
And just to piggyback off what you said, we've had the same issues with calling providers. We have to call stat results. And some of our rads call the stat results. Majority of the radiologists that I've worked with say blah blah blah. Call this in and say this to the provider, and you're like,
Oh, they
okay.
want you to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. And so we call it in, and a lot of times the provider will answer or call us right back, and we'll give them the results, and then we have to write down on our worksheet
Yep.
who we talk to, because a lot of
Hmm.
times it's not the provider who calls us, it's the nurse of the provider that calls us.
Yep.
And so we'll write down, talk to this nurse um, at Dr. So and so's office, and so then the radiologist will read it and include in their notes that
Yep.
it was communicated to this nurse, blah 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 blah. But the issues we've been having, just like yours, we will say, okay, well, you're going to send this person as a stat outpatient. So we're adding you onto our schedule that's already full.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can't, if anybody else, if somebody calls scheduling that day, you're not going to get in. You're going to,
Hmm.
we're booked a month out. But because your office says we need this stat, we have a relationship with your office, we say, okay, we'll fit them in here. And so we're doing this as now, okay, who do we call? You give us a phone number. We call the person over and over again. They don't answer. So we can't give you results. Just like what usually you're calling, give results. We're trying to call and give results.
Hmm.
And ultimately, we get to the point where we've called so many times, we have the patient waiting out here in the hallway or out in the waiting room, and I can't just have you waiting out here forever, like for
Yeah.
to get results. And so I'll put in I have to write in my notes, tried multiple times to call, unable to get in touch with, left voicemail, no call returned, and then that's what we put in our as impression, because
Hmm.
it's like, I mean, if it's a positive, luckily when we do that, it's a negative study, and I'm like, okay, like you can go home. They're not going to keep you regardless. We're not going to, but if it's a positive study, then you're like, okay, I'm not letting you go. You have to stay around,
Yep.
and somebody needs to answer the freaking phone. Like, and so we've had many times they tried to give us, well, this is the office's number. And I was like, no, like I need the back line, a direct line.
Yep.
I need to get in touch with this person. When this study is done, I need to get in touch with them. Like, and so sometimes you have to be very forceful, which is just like, come on, like if we're working them in for you, like it's like you said, it's ridiculous. And
It's stupid.
it's bad. It's bad patient care. It's bad. Yeah. From the provider. It's not the
And
way it
then
should be.
it's so here I call, right? I'll be the one that calls.
Mhm,
And if you don't get someone, man, 20, 30 minutes you could waste
mhm,
trying to get a hold of somebody. So, I mean, if I don't get a hold of somebody in like 5, 10 minutes, I'll draft it,
mhm,
go, dictate some more studies and then come back to it and see if I can get something. But
right,
I've never in my life, I've already done it 2 or 3 times here. I have to say that I called,
mhm,
who I called, when I called. And
mhm,
I've actually said in the note or in my impression that I left a voicemail and I'm awaiting a phone call back.
mhm,
And if they call, like the guy that called back, the other, whenever we talked about this the other day, I had to go
mhm,
back and addend the report
right.
and say they called back at this time.
It's
And it's when you guys are calling, you're calling results.
yeah,
Sometimes when I call, I didn't mention, I mentioned this off camera, but
mhm,
when we dictate studies that aren't at the main hospital, we
mhm,
don't get a history, right? Because it's not linked to Epic, or we just get the history that you guys put in.
mhm,
So when I read a study and it's positive, and I'm not sure if it's this, if it's X or Y, I
mhm,
think it's probably X, but let me. So sometimes I call and
mhm,
I want history from the provider themselves because
mhm,
they've seen the patient, they know the labs, they know the physical exam, and I'm like, okay, you're
mhm,
telling me this, now I definitely know it's X.
mhm,
Or, oh, I didn't, now that you're telling me this, I'm leaning more towards it being this other diagnosis.
right.
So I'm not always just calling to give you the results to give them the results of the exam.
Mhm,
Sometimes I need some information out of you to help me,
make the call.
steer which diagnosis I think this is.
Mhm,
And it can be, in this case, it's a big deal
mhm,
because it's either surgery or antibiotics would have been the difference
right.
in, and not just surgery. They would have had, it was
Yeah,
cancer, so they'd have had chemo
mhm,
and all this other.
yeah,
So I needed that history from you, and luckily he called, and gave me the
Mm,
history, and I'm like, okay, I was thinking it was this. Now I'm like 99.9% sure it's this.
right.
So,
That's
but yeah, that
huge.
just when you don't have a history, this is another thing, just an aside, but when you don't have a history, man, trying to
Hmm.
dictate these studies is
Yeah.
incredibly difficult.
Hmm.
You don't know how many CT abdomen pelvises I get. It just says pain. I'm like, you
Hmm.
can't even tell me right upper quadrant, left upper.
Right.
You can't tell me where this pain is at.
You're
Oh
like,
my
come on.
God.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I feel like I know sometimes I feel like the rads don't really, and maybe it's just me, like they're like, they don't really care. Like they're like, okay, well, it's pain, like whatever. I'm just gonna read it and dictate whatever your images say. But I guess talking to you and realize that like how important it is that everything I say or everything that is told to you, you put into thought to make your
Yeah.
dictation. And so
I don't
that's
just, when I was a resident, I would just, oh, here, dentist saw this on the exam. That's what I'm going to put in the report. But
hmm
now that I'm a little bit more competent in ultrasound, I don't just copy and paste what the ultrasound tech says.
right.
But I mean, your guys' history can be very.
Hmm.
We talked about the sonographic Murphy sign. I
Hmm.
personally put a lot of stock into that. If it's positive, if you tell me they're on morphine, okay,
Hmm.
then fine, you know. But if you
Right.
tell me this is like a native patient that's not on morphine and there's cholelithiasis and the sonographic Murphy sign is negative, even if the wall's not thick, there's no fluid around it.
Hmm.
I'm going to say equivocal and lean more towards this being positive.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I take into account, what you guys say,
Right.
and you guys usually end up talking to the patient more and getting a little bit more history.
True.
So even if you don't put the whole history in the
Hmm.
report or whatever, your
Hmm.
sheet or whatever, if you come and tell me, or if I call you and you can say, "Oh yeah, he mentioned this, this, and this," I'm like, "Oh, okay,
Right.
that's very helpful." So,
Yeah. 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 So don't realize
but
how important certain facts are that I guess.
yeah,
It's kind of interesting.
so
Um,
we'll get off the
the grind my Peter Griffin
yeah.
grind my
I just
gears.
I just I just shit on the ultrasound text for
Yeah,
20 minutes. So just I know you have some friends that are techs. We'll eventually bring them on, and
yeah.
you guys can shit on me. I know that techs have feelings about us, just like
Oh,
we
for
have
sure.
feelings about techs.
Yeah. You read the
So
Facebook groups. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
for sure.
Facebook groups, Jesus.
Hmm.
Okay, so somehow we do it every time. It's already 45 minutes.
Hmm.
We're gonna briefly talk about my trip, and then we're
Hmm.
gonna do my favorite segment. So I will just briefly talk about. I went to Big D, what, about a week ago, I guess, week and a
Hmm.
half ago. It
Yeah.
just so happened that I had some vacation,
Hmm.
and I was like, well, whatever. I
Hmm.
looked at what there was going on in Dallas,
Hmm.
and oh, well, actually, I lied. I saw a TikTok of Post Malone,
Uh,
and I was like, oh man, I've always heard he's really good live, yada yada yada. And
hmm.
it showed that he was on. It was him on tour, and I'm like, oh man,
Hmm.
I wonder where he's going to be.
Hmm.
When I'm on vacation.
Hmm.
Wouldn't you know it, Jesus just said, hey, man, he'll be in Dallas while you're on vacation.
Hmm. Gotta love
So
Dallas.
that's why I went. One, tickets were a little pricey, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah, Post
150
Malone.
bucks for lawn seats. And I'm just like, oh my God. But, whatever. That's
Hmm.
besides the point.
Hmm.
So I bought the tickets and but I went to Dallas, did a couple other things we can briefly mention because they were just a waste of time, I think. The aquarium, very underwhelming. More
Hmm.
birds than anything. I'm just
Oh
like,
man.
this is. And then I got to thinking like, how ethical are aquariums and zoos? I'm just
Hmm.
like, holy shit! I'm looking at this animal in a cage, and
Hmm.
one of them was like 22 years old, and I'm like, you've probably been in that fucking cage since you were born.
It's sad.
That's just an aside. I was like, I can't support this,
Yeah,
like,
it's sad.
but it was underwhelming. Farmers
Certain.
market for
Yeah.
Dallas, underwhelming. Like, come on.
Hmm.
Parking was a nightmare, but the
Yeah.
farmers market itself, underwhelming.
Hmm.
But the main attraction was Post Malone.
Right.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
One, it was hot as balls outside. It
Hmm.
was triple digits,
Right.
right before the concert started. We're outside. I'm getting blasted by the sun. and people could tell I'm redhead. I get fried. So
True.
you have to show up early because it's lawn is first come first serve. So you sit wherever you can. Showed up
Hmm.
like 2 hours early, and there's already just gazillions of people.
Hmm.
So,
Pre gamers.
but went. He had an opening band that was probably actually more my style, but he comes out and he's from I forget where, somewhere in Texas, close to Dallas.
Mm.
I think he was born in New York and he moved there, so he was is a little extra special, I think, for him to be in
Hmm.
Dallas.
That's cool.
So he comes out. I forget what song he started with. I recorded like the first 20 seconds of every song that he did, but
Hmm.
he was extremely. He's energetic. He's very involved, very upbeat and energetic when he performs.
Hmm.
So I've been to other concerts where I liked the music better. Like I've been to Blink 182. Their music to me is better than his. I just like it more.
Hmm.
But they are not even remote like a quarter of the performer that he is.
Wow.
He's very energetic. He's very entertaining. He's engaged. He talks with the audience.
Hmm.
He seems like a humble dude.
Yeah.
He's that's how he presented himself.
Hmm.
So and he does like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hour show, and I mean he's cooking the whole time. I don't know how he
Hmm.
did it. I
Yeah.
mean you can see why they do drugs. Like to keep the energy they have, you got to
Oh my
do
gosh.
something. It was 100 degrees outside,
Yeah.
so
He's young.
I don't
He's
know.
young.
Yeah, it's crazy. That got me thinking. He is young.
Hmm.
It's crazy. There are levels to success, right? Like,
Hmm.
you and I are successful, and
Hmm.
then I mean, but he's just
Ultra. Yeah.
he told us 28 maybe, and he's
Yes.
been popular for God knows how long already.
Right. Yeah.
And you're just like, holy, what kind of failure am I that this man is 28 and he's
That popular. That.
way more famous than I could ever hope to be.
Hmm.
And
No.
then just to piggyback off of that, we took an Uber afterwards,
Hmm.
and she told us Taylor Swift was in town whenever, and she's like, she sold out AT&T Stadium, which is where the Cowboys play,
Hmm.
3 days in a row, and I'm like, that's 100,000 people each time.
Yeah.
So you think Post Malone's popular?
Hmm.
Taylor Swift dwarfs this man.
Yeah.
There was maybe 20,000 people at his show, maybe.
Hmm.
She did 5 times that 3 days in a row. It's incredible.
Well, and I don't know if I told you, but Taylor Swift's been single-handedly boosting the economy
Yeah, you can
for
see
her
why, because
concerts.
100,000 people for one. That's one city.
Hmm.
She did that 3 days. I
Hmm.
can't even imagine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and her ticket sales are. I mean, it was like $1,400 on average for a ticket to
Yeah,
see her
yeah,
concert.
stupid.
It's just
So you
crazy.
think Post Malone, people like this are famous? There's
Yeah.
just people that make them look like
Mm.
average people.
Yep. And
But
just like us, we look like an average person. Somebody else might say,
yeah,
there's always levels of average or
yeah.
whatever, greatness.
But I mean, it was really good. He has my aesthetic, I guess, because he's covered in tattoos.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the aesthetic that I have and want. I won't go his
Hmm.
face, and he has head. He had his hair grown out, so he couldn't see his head tattoos. But I don't know why I'm such a big fan, but I'm a huge
Yeah.
fan of that man. Probably because he has my aesthetic. He seems like I think genuinely he seems like a nice dude, and
Yeah.
that's the best. My favorite part of him.
Right. That's what a lot of people say
So.
too. A lot of people say that he's a humble guy, that, he's like, yes, sir, no, ma'am,
Mhm. It was
kind.
really, there was one song or whatever he did. Oh, what's it called? The pit where the people are like
Oh,
right
yeah.
up next to the stage.
Yep. Yep.
I don't know if it was planned or whatever, but he picked the dude out of the pit and
Hmm.
told him to come on stage, and he actually let him play the guitar while he sang. He coached him through. He gave him like 2 or 3 minutes. He coached him. He's like, here's what we're gonna do, how we're gonna do it.
Hmm.
And then he just said, "Fuck it, we're going." And the dude nailed it. I mean, he nailed it. And then he gave him I think the guy was going to have it tattooed, but Post Malone signed his arm, so I think
Oh,
he's going to have it tattooed on him. He signed some, and then after he's like done and he's leaving the stage, you could see Post Malone point to somebody behind the stage or something,
hmm.
and like give a thumbs up. So I'm pretty sure that dude got to either go on the tour bus or meet him
Oh man,
after the show.
so
So
cool.
it was really cool.
Yeah, that kind of stuff
So
is really cool.
it makes me want to, now we gotta. Maybe I'll DM him on Instagram and see if
There
he'll.
you go. Once we get a couple more followers, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, it was cool. It's a
Hmm.
little depressing because like your man, I'll never be as successful or talented as that dude. He's actually a really good singer, but live, he's
Hmm.
really good. You
Oh
go to
wow.
Blink 182, Tom DeLonge sucks. Like he is garbage. But Post Malone, he was actually really good. His voice was really good. So,
Yeah. Oh, all right.
but
Well,
it was well worth the
worth the price of
six
admission.
hundred dollars that I spent driving and buying, and
Well,
it's crazy how much money that they make off of these people.
hmm
They were
well,
selling lawn chairs, like
mhm.
$20 a piece. That place, there were thousands of chairs. All his merchandise, all the money he probably doesn't see. That place just raked
Rakes
it
it
in
in.
off of that
Mhm.
man. So,
Well, and I think a lot of it, even I was watching different things, and the companies like a lot of times own these singers, and so they like own their names. They own because when they start out, they don't have anything, and so they're willing to
hmm
sign away this and that and this and that, and then when they get big, they're
yep,
they're owned by somebody else already, and you're like, well, I don't even own my own name anymore. Like this
yeah,
is, and so
that's crazy. I saw
oh
that with John Cena. That's his
mm,
government name, and he's like, "Yeah, Vince McMahon owns
government
my
name.
name." I'm just like, I mean, it's worth it, right? He's ultra famous and rich and yada. But that's crazy that you just sign away your government name.
Mhm. When you're desperate, you're like, I'm trying to make it. So whatever you need
I'd
to
sign
tell
it
me,
away now, and I'm not desperate. So,
no, yeah. Oh God, just don't get rid of Rad Talk.
yeah,
Um,
no, 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 that's under your name. So,
yeah, that's there you go. That's fine. Um,
all right,
okay,
last part, we get to do my favorite question or
your
my favorite
favorite.
segment, which is the question.
Hmm.
This was easy for me, but the question for today is: what is one thing that you like that would traditionally be considered geeky or nerdy?
Hmm. And you want me to go first?
I can go first. Mine's super easy, but it would be mythology. So
Hmm.
I'm big into mainly Greek and Norse mythology. I
Hmm.
have, this, but I've started a leg sleeve for Greek mythology. I have Kratos and I have some other guys. I'm actually going, yeah, next month to get it worked on some more.
Mm.
But I'm huge into
Mythology.
Greek,
Yeah.
Norse. I do Norse on the other side, so I get Thor and
Hmm.
Loki and Odin, all those guys. But I
Right.
think most people would consider that probably. I'm sure there's a difference between geeky and nerdy. I think this is, I don't know, geeky maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's definitely.
Hmm.
I think most people would think it's geeky or nerdy.
I think so too. Yeah, but it's unique to you. I mean, that's you. And I think maybe at some point you'll post a couple of these tattoos, give the tattoo artist a shout out or something.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
mean he's much more famous than I am, but yeah, I can.
yeah, maybe down the line we'll do something like
Yeah,
that. Okay, my geeky or nerdy thing, it's gonna be you're gonna really think I'm like hardcore geeky nerdy.
yeah.
Um, I have been into Pokemon.
Oh God,
It's
Jesus
it's like a
Christ.
guilty pleasure. Like when I was a kid, I was really big into Pokemon, and so then when Pokemon Go came back, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is when I was like in middle school. Like this was like so cool, and so I
Yeah.
still will play like Pokemon Go or
Do you have cards and stuff?
no, I have cards probably from when I was a kid. Like I held on to different cards, but it's more just like the games. I play the games. I've always enjoyed the games.
Who's your
Um,
favorite?
Probably Charizard.
Oh,
Stereotypical, I know,
yeah. Come on
very
now.
typical. But when I watched that movie, that one movie where Charizard saved Ash as he was about to die in that fiery pit. I don't remember which one it was. I think it's one with Mewtwo. It might have been the first movie. It might have been the
Mewtwo
original.
was my favorite. He was a stud.
Yeah, he was.
Uh,
He was.
but they just closed the chapter on Ash, right? They just got rid of him for
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I
replaced
believe
him,
so.
whatever.
Which
So
is
I
crazy.
never got into Pokemon. So
But you just know all about Ash and Charizard and Mewtwo. Yeah, sure.
yeah, yeah. Mewtwo, I liked him.
Yeah,
So
it's a bad dude. But yeah, I think that's probably like something
yeah,
super
for sure. That's
special.
100%. Yeah, you're a
Yeah,
nerd.
because I'll be like
So
walking around like the hospital on my break or something, and I'm just
oh
like,
my
oh
God,
yeah, yeah, I know. It's my
wow.
if you're bored, it gives me steps. I get my steps in.
Yeah, that's what people say. Gets my
Yeah,
steps in.
that's all I'm here for. Just get my.
Just
It's
admit
not that
you're.
really. It's just all about the steps. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
we
I think
somehow
this
drug out
concludes.
another 55 minutes.
Yeah,
So
I think this is going to conclude episode 11, which is awesome. I know we've been not putting out as much um, of
consistently,
these, yeah, consistently of these podcasts, but we're gonna try to continue to put out some more. We've got a lot of stuff to get into, even
I got.
random stuff like bachelor parties that happened, and different little tidbits about our lives that we can talk about. So we'll get into that in the future episodes.
And then don't forget, I've been putting out some dank ass memes on
Yes,
social
yes.
media.
Gage is killing it.
So we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram,
Mm.
YouTube. I started a Facebook. I guess it's called a page. I don't know. It's not like our Facebook page, but
Hmm.
it's a group page. I don't know, whatever it is. I started the one on Facebook, so
Okay.
we have all of that.
Hmm.
The TikTok and Instagram, YouTube is rad_talk_DG.
Hmm.
We're almost at 50 followers actually on TikTok. I mean on YouTube. We have I don't update you on the YouTube, but it does way better than TikTok.
Yeah,
So
currently, right.
mhm.
As long as that algorithm
So
keeps going, yeah.
yeah, follow us. You can like the memes,
Hmm.
and then obviously search Rad Talk on Spotify, Apple, Podbean.
Hmm.
That's where the podcast, the audio portion of it is.
Right.
So
And Rad Talk with DG. If anybody wants any sponsors, Rad Talk with DG at gmail.com. Excuse me.
yeah,
If you want to throw us a sponsor, or you want us to
yeah, we
talk
need it.
about something else or whatever that is.
We need a sponsor so we can monetize. Since we both hate our day jobs, we have to start monetizing it so we can quit. So we can quit.
So we can quit our day job.
I'll talk about it if I don't have to work it too. But going to work it and then coming home to talk about it,
Yeah,
mm,
it's too much.
it's not good.
But
So
but cool.
all
Episode
right, I
11 in
think
the
that'll
books.
wrap us up, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yep. Take care.